It's Wednesday, April 24th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It's a hell of a day to talk ball. It's always a hell of a day to talk ball, but it's especially a hell of a day to talk ball because joining me to do just that live in person in the Yahoo LA studio is NFL Media's, NFL Networks, NFL Fantasies, TVs, and my pal, Marcas Grant. MG, what's going on, buddy?
It's nice. Like, I have this beautiful couch, this whole setup. I'm really happy to be here, man. It's good to see you in real life and not just digitally.
I will say, of all the people I was looking forward to seeing coming back to LA, you were actually on the bottom of the list.
I figured, yeah.
But only because I literally just saw you in February at the Super Bowl.
This is true. We ran into each other. We had some adult beverages in Las Vegas. A good time was had by all. So, but it is nice to see. It's funny, though, because I feel like now that you have moved to the opposite side of the country from me, we probably see each other about the same amount of time as when we lived like 15 minutes from each other.
You know, nobody cares about this, but I'm going to say this anyways. It's so true about LA that, yeah, we've probably seen each other as much in the last few months as we did like the last few months I was living here. Mm-hmm. The craziest story, and I'm only saying this and we got to tell a story about franchise because you're on the show. The craziest thing to me, and I guess this wasn't at the time, but when I first started dating my now wife, I was telling her about my friend franchise and like, yeah, we don't see each other that much, but like, I mean, we used to see each other all the time because we work together every day. And she's like, well, where does he live? I'm like, oh, probably like half a mile up the street in Culver City. And she's like, well, you guys never hang out? No, it's just, that's the way LA is. Yeah. But it's good to be back in LA. It's good to be talking to Marcas Grant. And it's good that draft week is
finally here.
Yeah, I mean, you were just talking about this before the show got started, but draft week, definitely just a little bit too long.
The whole season's just too long because it essentially starts like after the Super Bowl, right? I mean, depending on how deep you are into this, you probably started even in January, like once the college season ends. But it begins in earnest after the Super Bowl. A couple weeks after that, you're into combine. Free agency still plays a part because guys are moving around and opening up other spots potentially for draftees to land. We got all these things happening. And then we just sort of hit that silly season where like everybody's taken their visits. They've done all their pro days and we still have a couple of weeks left. And now you just have the takes.
Yeah.
The takes.
Like takes and the most made up like nonsense of, like I was going back and forth with the wonderful producer of the show, Colin Brennan, earlier today. And he's like, sending me things about like, yeah, it sounds like Bo Nix and Michael Penix could go 12 and 13. I'm like, yeah, they'll probably both end up being second rounders. And we'll all realize we just totally wasted our time because that's the draft coverage.
I mean, now like this morning I woke up, I see some tweet about like some anonymous scouts comparing Caleb Williams to Prince. And I'm like, they're like meant it as an insult. I'm like, that seems great. Yeah. Like I want my quarterback to be one of the greatest of all times at the thing he does. Like this seems awesome. Plus, I think having Prince as your quarterback would just be comedy.
I think that would be great. Right. Probably a little bit too slight for the position. If we've got questions about Bryce Young's height, I don't know. Prince might be a dimension-based failure. But yes, draft season can be exhausting, but it's over. But the good thing is, you want the content. You want the content this week because we have so much coming at you here at Yahoo. Let me just run through the programming notes. Number one, obviously today, we have this great show that we're on right now, which is the Prospect Wishcasting show. Marcas and I are going to give out, it's just basically the final piece of fan fiction for what, draft season has been here for us here on the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. We're going to just play a little matchmaker here, player to team that we really want to see. And listen, if it's all just selfish fantasy purposes, that's fine. Then tomorrow and Friday night, Yahoo is going to have a live draft stream on our YouTube page, Facebook, Twitter. You can find it on any social media sites, the big ones, right? But check it out, especially on YouTube, Yahoo Sports YouTube page. Loaded cast. I will be there, whatever, who cares? Senior NFL writer Charles Robinson will be there. Adam Gorney from Rivals is going to be on the show. Jason Fitz, of course, will be there. And former Patriots and Bills running back Damian Harris will also be joining the show. We are going to give our reaction to basically every pick, fantasy reaction, the Rivals background. We're going to have you all covered on that, so definitely make that your second screen experience. Keep the NFL Network
please
on so Marcas can get those checks cashed. Yeah, but second screen experience, you got all kinds of screens, okay? We got like a bunch of screens here. Have that up on the Yahoo show. And then Charles McDonald and I will be coming to you Thursday night, so Friday morning, and then Sunday to recap the entire first round and then the full draft on this very podcast feed or on YouTube. So a lot of stuff coming up, Marcus, but let's waste no more time. Let's get into it. Let's talk quarterbacks here, and let's start with actually, let's set the ground rules for this exercise. I don't know about you, but I tried to stay kind of in realistic zone.
Okay.
Like I didn't send, Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Chiefs. Maybe you did. I don't know. That's not how I played it. I tried to stay somewhat realistic with my little wish-casting matchmaker here. But with that said, Caleb Williams, your guy from USC, I just sent him to the Bears. What did you do?
I sent him to the Bears.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, that makes the most sense, right? They've got the infrastructure. They've got some wide receivers. They're young and evolving, and they didn't make the mistake that the Panthers did of, potentially drafting a franchise-type guy and giving him nothing to work with.
Yeah, there's a lot to work with for Caleb Williams there, and I mean, I think this is the one that is definitely going to happen. I don't know if we'll get any of these other ones right. Maybe a handful more. This one's definitely happening. And there's been so much kind of like nauseating discourse about like Bears Caleb. There's been nauseating discourse about Caleb Williams and like Bears quarterback history and like should he pull an Eli Manning, all this stuff. But I'm with you that I think he's set up to succeed in this spot. Just from like a results-based standpoint in year one. How truly good do you think this offense can be with a rookie quarterback? And because that's been something in fantasy, typically like rookie quarterbacks scare us off a little bit, but I think CJ Stroud has us kind of rethinking things from last year.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people complain about Caleb and his penchant to play hero ball, but this was a defense that was giving up 40 points a game last year for USC, so he sort of had to do that. That's not going to be the case, I think, this year in Chicago. And I think one of the things underrated about him is how well he plays in structure. When you look at the guys, or you talk to the people who do a lot of film study and who watch Caleb, the fact that he puts throws on time and on target is one of his biggest strengths. Yes, all the highlights you see are him playing out of structure and off platform and making these ridiculous throws, but just the basic fundamentals of what he does are the reason that he is the potential number one pick right now.
Yeah, I'm with you that I think the in-structure stuff for him has kind of gotten glossed over because of some of the hero ball instincts. And by the way, like you want a quarterback to have that second reaction
right.
instinct. So I would rather, just for me, I'd rather try to, it's the opposite of like when you're baking something, you want to add ingredients in. You can't take them out. Once it's in the mix, it's there. I think with quarterback play, you'd almost rather work that aggression out of him rather than try to get it into him, because there are some prospects, and I don't think really any of the guys this year fit that bill, but there's some prospects that you're like, hey, it's there, like rip it. Okay. A lot of quarterbacks in the NFL, I get on, like Russell Wilson is this way. I think Justin Fields for the Bears was this way too, where it's like that throw is there, man. Like you gotta take that thing. Okay. I think Caleb luckily has that already in his DNA. So I think he can be productive. I think that Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, that's going to be an interesting like rankings debate when we get to that point in the summer, but we're not at that point. We're still in prospect zone. So let's go on to the next one here. Let's go to Drake May. Where did you send Drake May?
All right. So we're wish casting, right? This one is probably one that's not realistic. In fact, it's very much not realistic, but the Buccaneers, just because I think he's like Baker Mayfield deluxe, right? He's that guy who, when you watch him, sometimes he sort of thrives on chaos. Sometimes he is the cause of the chaos, but he very much kind of thrives in those situations. And where last year we saw Baker kind of have his best season ever, some of it was just the F it, Mike Evans is down there somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think Drake May sort of has that. And knowing that, yes, the Bucs have sort of committed to Baker, but they're not necessarily married to Baker Mayfield. This could be a nice situation where he comes in, he either competes, maybe he sits for a year, and then he takes over the gig. I know it's not going to happen, but we're sitting here playing wish casting, so that's where I wish casted him.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Somewhere where he doesn't have to start right away makes just all the difference, I think, for a guy like Drake May, because I've seen some people make the Jordan Love comparison from like a stylistic comparison. I think he's better than Jordan Love coming into the NFL, but still, I think the thing with Jordan Love is it took a minute for him to get going last year, and obviously he had already been marinating for years in Green Bay. I think that Drake May sort of on a less dramatic plan there. He doesn't have to sit multiple seasons, but in your scenario, he would sit multiple seasons. I think that would be good for him. I sent him to Minnesota because I think just like they trade up, they make this happen. And I know they really like Drake May. Everything I've heard is that they really like Drake May. I wonder how much they like him versus JJ McCarthy. I'm still working that around in my head. But I just think overall, that's a great spot for him. I'm not a Sam Darnold sicko. As a USC alum, you might still be one of the Sam Darnold sickos.
I've gotten that out of my system now.
That's good. I'm proud of you. That's growth, ladies and gentlemen.
It's out of my system now.
Our mutual friend James Coe, we're still working on Coe.
Is he a Darnold sicko?
Yeah, he's a Darnold. He's just a Pac-12 bro, and like he's a sicko in general. So
I mean, it's because there are too many Cal quarterbacks besides Rodgers and Goff that he can be a sicko about.
Yeah, fair enough. But
I mean, where's Davis Webb nowadays?
I think he's quarterback coach. So didn't work out on the field. So overall, I do think that that's a good place for him to maybe sit like a month, behind Sam Darnold. And more importantly, it's just a great ecosystem of weapons, and Kevin O'Connell's a great coach. So I think that's the best place for him to go to get the peak ability out of his tools. All right, next one up here. Let's talk Jayden Daniels. I'm very curious because if you're going to aggressively wish cast, I'm very curious where you're sending him.
I'm aggressively wish casting him to the Raiders.
Okay.
Right. Like there's been those rumors that maybe the Raiders do something crazy and they move up. I don't realistically think that's going to happen on Thursday night. But so I sort of looked at it. I'm going to go into like sort of nerd movie mode, right? Like they bring in Luke Getsy as the offensive coordinator. And I really thought that meant they were going to make a real run at Justin Fields to bring him in as quarterback. Obviously, that didn't happen. So now I look at it as like Luke Getsy is Guy Ritchie, right? And Guy Ritchie went out years ago and made a movie called Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Really good movie. A lot of fun. I know you haven't seen it because you've only seen like 7 movies in your whole life. I know. Yeah. But a few years later, he made another movie called Snatch, which was very similar and a whole lot of fun and slightly more refined. Justin Fields is Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Jayden Daniels is Snatch. They're very similar in a lot of respects. Daniels may be a little bit more refined. And for Getsy, this is a chance to maybe try it again, see what didn't work the first time with Fields, try to get that better with Daniels. He's got some guys that he can throw to with Devontae Adams, with Jacoby Myers. I hope that, 1 year of not being, in the spotlight made us forget that Michael Mayer is a really good tight end prospect. Yeah. I think there's something there. I think for Raider fans, that is pie in the sky. I don't think it's going to happen, but it'd be kind of fun to watch.
I also don't think it's going to happen, but I don't think it's completely out of the question that the Raiders go up and be aggressive. And I'm sure you've heard it too, that like there is a mutual interest there. Mm-hmm. There's a mutual interest. There's connective tissue, obviously, because of Antonio Pierce's time at the same school with Jayden Daniels, or he was part of the recruiting process. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And that's an environment where I think he could succeed. And by the way, like, I think Jayden Daniels would be like a fantasy starter, with those guys, like with his rushing ability and those guys that you mentioned, Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. Like, I think you would actually have sneaky QB1 appeal there.
I agree.
My spot that I'm sending him to is more realistic. It's probably what's going to happen. And I actually still think that there'd be some legit fantasy value here. I'm sending him to Washington.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like the logic of Jayden Daniels fits Cliff Kingsbury's offense better than Drake May or J.J. McCarthy. So we're going to take him because I just personally, Marcas, and as a USC guy, you probably feel the same way. I'm not like basing my decision-making off of Cliff Kingsbury.
No, not even a little bit. Cliff Kingsbury was at USC to get himself back to the NFL.
And it worked.
It worked.
So can't hate on a process that works. But overall, I'm not making that decision, kind of based on Cliff Kingsbury. But if you are going to do that, I think he does map to that offense pretty well. And I think that the guys that they have there from a receiving perspective, like Jayden Daniels showed you he can work with an outside vertical threat, which is what Terry McLaurin is. I think Terry McLaurin is just, waiting to be maximized. If not, he's just going to be the next Allen Robinson. Both these are, flickering in my heart a little bit as I say that. And I think Jahan Dotson can run those like slot vertical routes that LSU's offense ran very well too. So I think Jayden Daniels in my wish casting scenario has real fantasy value, and I also think he's going to elevate those two players as well.
No, I really do think wherever Jayden Daniels lands, he's going to draw some sort of fantasy interest. Now, what the pieces around him are sort of determines how great that interest is. But I think, look, people are going to look around and be like, he can run, and that alone. Look at what happened with Anthony Richardson last year.
Yeah.
There were real questions about him as a passer, but everybody's like, you know what? He could potentially, if he's healthy, give me 8 to 10 rushing touchdowns. Like, I'm in for that.
Yep, I think that makes so much sense. Okay, last thing I will say though about Jayden Daniels landing with Washington, if he does, our pal Austin Eckler is not catching a lot of passes there. So that is a bit of a tough spot for Eckler's fantasy value. But let's talk JJ McCarthy here, and I will give my landing spot first because I sent him to the Raiders in an aggressive like trade up type situation. I think this actually could happen. I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it will happen, but I think it could happen. Here's my logic, and I kind of talked about this a little bit on yesterday's podcast with Thor Nystrom, that I do think that the Raiders are not Minnesota in terms of setup to incubate a quarterback, but for a lot of the reasons that you kind of outlined, they have a number one receiver that JJ can lean on. I think they're going to run just like a pretty standard like if they have Jayden Daniels, they'll run a very different offense than even really what Getsy was doing with Justin Fields. But a lot, you know this, that like a lot of the consternation there between Fields and Getsy was they really wanted to run like a normal NFL offense, and then it's like that's not your quarterback, so you can't you got to adjust to your quarterback. But if JJ McCarthy's the guy, I think they just run a pretty standard like Matt LaFleur, Shanahan tree offshoot type of offense. And I do think that JJ McCarthy can run that type of offense well. And I think he would be a type of guy that like Devontae Adams on crossing routes, middle of the field stuff. All I really care about with the Raiders, Marcus, is like, don't waste another year of Devontae Adams. Like, I don't need to see a Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, training camp battle. Don't sell that to me this summer. Let's get JJ McCarthy in the mix there.
Oh man, you don't want to see AOC rocking the weird mustache and looking like a, Metro cop or something like that.
As a fellow mid-mustache guy, I'll say that with pride. I don't have the greatest mustache in the world. Aiden O'Connell, please, bro. Like, it's not even about the mustache for me. It's just, this is Devontae Adams, okay? I know he requested this and people get all upset about that, right? Like, well, you wanted to trade, whatever. This is what happens. I understand that. Like, I understand that sometimes you face the consequences of your inaction or, me reaping versus me sowing. Not that fun. But on the outside, like, I don't need that.
He also didn't expect that his, like, best friend and college buddy was going to get, sent away basically after a year.
Should have spent some time perusing Josh McDaniels' Wikipedia page.
Maybe that's
thought
maybe
that
that's
chaos
his bad
is around
too.
the corner.
So my landing spot for JJ McCarthy, again, in another sort of aggressive move up, it would be the Denver Broncos because he just feels like a Sean Payton quarterback. We know Sean Payton is very set about how he wants his offense run, and he wants you to run it as he wants you to run it. And Russell Wilson sometimes just like, yeah, that's cool. I'm going to do me. And that just was part of the reason that whole thing never really worked out.
Awful marriage to begin with.
It was an awful marriage to begin with. Part of what made J.J. McCarthy work at Michigan, and part of what else I think sort of worked against him in the draft process, is because he very much ran the system as designed for him. It helped that he had talent around him, and I know that was sort of a knock on him, which is I'm like, hey man, you got good players, like use your good players. That your long-held theory of just throw it to your good players.
Just throw it to good players.
J.J. McCarthy lived by that. Now the problem in Denver is I don't know which good players he has to throw to. That's sort of an issue.
A little bit.
We'll see what they decide to do in this draft. But I think in terms of sort of being able to maybe hide some of the blemishes of J.J. McCarthy and getting the best out of him, I think Sean Payton can do that. He's, obviously not as big and as strong as a Taysom Hill, but I think he's a better thrower of the football than Taysom Hill. So you take one and you substitute it for the other. Again, I think this has to be Denver being very aggressive. I don't know that they have the assets to get up high enough to get J.J. McCarthy, but I'm sure it's something that, that Sean Payton is doing the Birdman hand-rubbing thing at the idea of having J.J. McCarthy.
Okay, so I do think that is unlikely, but I love the fit, actually. I think J.J. McCarthy could do a lot of the like early Drew Brees type of Sean Payton offense, not the later career Drew Brees.
Well, when Drew Brees' arm was basically shot. So.
Right, but if they wanted to run that offense, you know who they could get. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've talked about this marriage so much, I feel like, on the podcast. But my next one, I sent Bo Nix to the Broncos. Okay. I think that he could run the later career Drew Brees offense.
Okay.
Look, I go back and forth on the Bo Nix stuff. I do think, like I said on the podcast yesterday, I think you're going to start running into that ceiling pretty quickly if Bo Nix is your long-term starter. Again, don't have to get too deep in this one because we've talked about Bo Nix, the Broncos, somehow weirdly like a lot on this show, but that was ultimately, I went boring and I sent him to that spot.
All right. So my Bo Nix landing spot was the Rams, but the problem with that is you mentioned the ceiling you're going to run into because he is an older prospect. I think somebody once called him Stetson Bennett 2.0 in terms of just age. And that's
By the way, the Rams took
Stetson Bennett, and he's got sent to the shadow zone. Like he's been banished to the shadow realm. Who knows where he is right now? But at some point, they do have to start looking at life after Matthew Stafford. Like that's the thing they're going to have to work on. And the big knock on on Nix at Oregon was just basically that, like, he didn't really challenge down the field. It was a lot of short throws, a lot of screens and that sort of thing. Well, look, man, he's got Cooper Kupp, he's got Puka Nacua. Those are two guys that can sort of help you out in the intermediate part of the field. You're not going to necessarily be asked to push the ball down the field. I guess he could if he needed to, but that's not a thing he would have to do in the context of this Sean McVay offense. The problem is Stafford still has at least a year, maybe two more in him, and with a quarterback who's, 24, 25 years old, that's a problem. But I do think, all things being equal, if he could somehow wait, we could find the fountain of youth for him, it wouldn't be a bad thing for him to sit a year or so behind Stafford and then step into that offense.
I think that makes sense. Like, stylistically, he does fit that sort of attack. I just think the kind of the timeline of it is a little weird. But I do think he could push it a little bit to like Puka over the middle of the field. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's really all we're looking for from Stafford's successor.
Yep.
What'd you do with Michael Penix?
I sent him to the Commanders, actually. Okay. And maybe Washington decides that we're going to trade down, we're going to get some assets, we can still find Penix somewhere in the middle of the first round. I love the arm strength. Obviously, health is an issue, and it's definitely a concern behind an offensive line that was a turnstile this past. I mean, look, the conversation halfway through the year was, is Sam Howell going to be alive at the end of the year with how much he's getting sacked? Penix, to his credit, did not take a lot of sacks in his time at Washington. He was able to get rid of the football. People have sort of complained about his accuracy in terms of especially downfield, but you put him with Terry McLaurin, put him with Jahan Dotson, a couple of guys who can make contested catches, who can go up and get the football. That sort of erases, I think, a lot of that concern for you there. So, again, Penix also sort of has the, maybe not as bad as Bo Nix, but has the issue of being a little bit of an older quarterback, so you would have to get him in there right away. But look, in Washington at this point, there aren't a whole lot of impediments to him getting a starting job right now.
Yeah, two separators too. I think he would have had an embarrassment of riches at the pass catcher position. Did Michael Penix of Washington? You would have it in this Washington too.
Yep.
In our dream scenario, like exercise, none of the top guys ended up going to New England. I did sacrifice someone to the Patriots here, and it was
I just couldn't do it in my heart.
I know, and I'm a much worse person than you. You're a much better person than I am, and so I had to send somebody to the Patriots. I sent Michael Penix there, and I don't really know what to say about it. Like, it doesn't. The thing is, this is a fantasy exercise, I guess, and he's not going to be fantasy viable pretty much anywhere he goes.
True.
Why not just go to the least fan? And I don't need him to rescue anybody there either. I'm kind of lukewarm on whether Penix could be. I think he just needs such a perfect situation to go to. This is the complete imperfect situation. So again, I feel bad, Michael Penix, but this is what happened. It was great analysis.
Sorry about your luck.
Sorry about your luck, pal. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to run through running backs and pass catchers. All right, we're back. Running backs, Marcus. Weirdly, I'm going to say we can pick up the pace on this position because the prospects are not as sexy this year, which is just a shame for a fantasy football show. We should be wishcasting these guys to great places, but I think there are some potential good landing spots. We're only going to really go over the top 4 running backs unless you have any extra bonus names. So let's start with Jonathon Brooks. Where are you sending him?
I sent him to Cincinnati.
Ooh, okay.
Because, look, they don't necessarily need him right away because you're not getting Jonathon Brooks right away because of the ACL tear, what happened November. It was pretty late in the season when it happened. They have Zach Moss, at least for the next couple of years, but Brooks, when he's healthy, can step in and be your RB1. He gives you enough of a pass catching ability that, I think he makes up for whatever you had with Joe Mixon when he was there. He can be enough of a runner. I mean, look, Jonathon Brooks' greatest sin in college was going to the same schools like Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson.
Yeah.
He's a really talented player. You just have to wait on him. The Bengals can afford to wait for a year because they have Zach Moss.
I like that. And I actually have been wondering if the Bengals are a sneaky running back spot on day 2, just because there's a lot of Chase Brown truthers out there in the fantasy space.
I'm kind of one.
Yeah, you don't want to fully say it, but you kind of sort of want to say it. I feel that. I'm kind of a Zach Moss truther a little bit. I think he was really not okay. Let me see that up there. I'm not a Michelle Majuk level Zach Moss truther. Okay, there's more long term Zach Moss truthers than me, but I just really like what he brought you last year, but I don't think he's a real long-term solution. I wonder if they look at this year to get a long-term solution. So I like that. I went a little more running back chalk here, but not to the Cowboys because that is the most chalky one.
Yes.
I sent Jonathon Brooks to the Chargers because look, somebody's got to go to LA. I think they have a guy that Gus Edwards, Zach Moss, sort of samey here in terms of this guy can hold the fort down for the Chargers until Jonathon Brooks is ready to rock. And I just think from like Greg Roman running scheme perspective, like you want a guy with a lot of juice, sort of. I know he's got the Aaron Jones comps out there. Like you're blasting open big holes in like a man gap sort of scheme there. Why not Jonathon Brooks be kind of like the big play element there? And that's the one thing that I think the Chargers run game has really been lacking for one reason or another is a lot of like explosive plays under Justin Herbert. I feel like with Jonathon Brooks there, we're getting some explosive plays here.
Yeah, I can see that too. I mean, because everything the Chargers have done this offseason suggests they want to run the football more, from their head coach hiring to the OC hiring.
The way they've just said it.
Right? I mean, you have Jim Harbaugh giving soliloquies on the beauties of offensive line play. Like, they want to run the ball.
Yeah, I love it. All right, let's talk Trey Benson. This is where I sent someone to the Cowboys. I sent Trey Benson to the Cowboys for a couple reasons, because I think Trey Benson's probably, just based on his collegiate history, is not like ready to be like a workhorse early. I think he can be a lead back, an RB1, no question about it. But, you know, he's not a guy that had like a bunch of 20 carry games on his ledger. That's just not who he was in college. I don't think he necessarily needs to be that here in Dallas. Like Rico Dowdle's interesting enough that you can keep in the mix. They signed Royce Freeman, who Royce Freeman kind of looked good with the Rams last year. Just like, he kind of looked pretty good with the Rams last year at times. I don't want to talk about a chest stick. I don't want to say with my full chest, but that's sort of how I feel. So two guys that like can get in the mix here, can work there, and then you're sort of ramping Trey Benson up in a very similar way that they ramped Tony Pollard up. And he can also contribute a little bit out of the backfield too. So that's sort of my perfect pairing for the Cowboys running back.
So I sent him one state over to New Orleans, to the Saints there.
Bro, there's so many running backs in New Orleans though.
Okay. How many of them stand out though at this point? Like at this point, you're Trey Benson. Why not give yourself an opportunity? Because look, we're sunsetting, and I love Alvin Kamara, but it's time to sunset Alvin Kamara in this offense, right? You don't have Taysom Hill to be the touchdown vulture when you get down near the goal line anymore. Yes, there are a lot of guys there, but I don't see how Trey Benson can't work himself into a decent role in this offense. It is crowded. Don't care. I want to see him get a shot there in New Orleans.
This is the first one of yours that I kind of hate, and that might only be because I was like a Kendre Miller guy last year.
I'm a Kendre Miller guy too, but it just doesn't seem like the Saints are Kendre Miller people.
Probably shouldn't have drafted him in the third round. Well, he did. To be fair to old Kendre, he did pick up like a lot of hamstring issues last year. Yep. So I don't know. That nothing about New Orleans gets me very excited right now.
I mean, like the whole offense is dull and unexciting, but you know, somebody's got to run the ball, right?
Terrific. Okay, all right. Let's talk Jalen Wright. I'm praying you have a better landing spot for Jalen Wright.
Ooh, my Jalen Wright landing spot right now is probably, I want to say the Chargers, but no, I can't really send him there. I don't really know where to send Jalen Wright. This is one I have a problem with.
Okay. I'll give you mine.
Okay.
I went Chiefs because I think that they have like a guy that they can count on to be the clear-cut workhorse, right? They have it's in Isaiah Pacheco. He's a guy that gives you both like grinder level carries, but also brings an explosive element. I also kind of feel like Jalen Wright is a little samey in that regard, that like how you want to ease him in early in his career. Like this is a very similar path where like we're getting some explosive plays with Isaiah Pacheco early in his career. And now he's like a guy that they can handle. He can handle big workload. And I think that could end up being Jalen Wright, but I think that's going to take some time, right? Like he's just based on what he did in college. It's a lot of like stuff that doesn't map to the NFL. You know, it's wide open lanes, super light boxes because it's all spread out. I think you kind of have to maybe not start from scratch with him as a runner, but all that we're looking for in Kansas City, I think, is just someone to spell Pacheco, and like they started trusting him on passing downs last year. So again, he's not going to necessarily be a league winner in this spot, but I do think it's a spot where he can grow and develop into his best self.
How do you feel about the Rams?
Yeah, I think Rams are good too. Also another guy that like, or another team that's going to define the reads for you. Right. Like this is your gap. Hit that gap and go.
All the scuttlebutt is that they're not going to go in. At least everybody believes they're not just going to go into the year with Kyron Williams getting the same kind of workload that he did this past year. So maybe it's Los Angeles for him.
And again, I think that Wright would just be a sort of change of pace option there. So that makes a lot of sense. All right, unless you've got anyone else, last running back. We'll talk two more running backs here. Okay. Excuse me. Let's talk Blake Corum next. Where are we going with him?
I sent him to the Raiders, just kind of as a compliment to Zamir White. Like What I thought was really funny this offseason was everybody's like big on Zamir White after Josh Jacobs left. They're like, all right, Zamir White season. And the Raiders like, we signed Alexander Madison. And everybody's like, all right, Zamir White season. Like nothing
Poor Alexander Madison,
at all. Blake Corum can sort of be, I don't want to say a rich man's Alexander Madison, but maybe Alexander Madison where you've turned back the clock a few years, right? Where you've got a little bit less wear and tear on him. Because there's nothing about Madison that really blows you away. I think Corum is a good running back, not necessarily a great running back. And so I think you pair him with Zamir White. I think you have the makings of you can get 3 downs out of that backfield necessarily. I don't know there's any place where Blake Corum comes in and immediately challenges to be the RB1. I just don't see it anywhere.
Really? I think he's a guy that could have a high floor, but like a low career-long ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
I sent him to the Giants because I think
they need someone.
Dude, they need somebody. Like, I know that Brian Daboll knows Devin Singletary. There's familiarity there, of course, from their time in Buffalo. But yeah, I mean, to me, you can't just sell like, yeah, we just let Saquon Barkley walk because we don't pay running backs, whatever. But we gave Devin Singletary a 3-year deal and we're just ready to rock. No, I think he needs something a little bit more there. And they're an offense that I feel like does need a level of consistency. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Blake Corum's going to give you. Like, I really like the way Charles McDonald broke him down on the show, talked about him as a guy that when he is running well, it really looks like teach tape, like very technically sound, very precise with what he does. And again, this is just an offense that needs someone to come in there and like execute the assignment, which basically is Devin Singletary, but I think Blake Corum's a little bit of a better version of that.
Yeah. Devin Singletary. I mean, I liked him. I really did. I liked him all those years in Buffalo. At one point, it felt like he needed 3 forms of ID to get in the end zone.
Yeah.
He just
not a touchdown scorer. I do think Blake Corum could be a potential touchdown scorer. So I like that one there. All right, last one we'll cover, Marshawn Lloyd.
He's the guy I sent to the Chargers.
Yeah.
I sent
is this USC bias?
A little bit, yeah. A little bit. So this is just my own personal feelings. Again, having watched a lot of USC the last couple of years, what frustrated me, especially this past season, is that it felt at times like Lincoln Riley was trying to win Caleb Williams another Heisman, and sometimes to the detriment of the offense. Because I think there were times when Lloyd was running well and can be explosive and can sort of exploit a defense, and then all of a sudden Caleb's throwing the ball 40 times a game when it just didn't necessarily have to happen. So I think in Los Angeles, as we mentioned, they want to run the football. He can be a nice pairing with Gus Edwards. Side note, J.K. Dobbins, this is like a marriage of convenience, right? With J.K. Dobbins, it's like he comes relatively inexpensively for the Chargers. For Dobbins, it's a chance to get on the field and show that he has something left.
I think it's a we'll see what happens. We know you, and we'll see what happens.
Right. I mean, I feel like that's kind of what that is. But I think Marshawn Lloyd with the Chargers, especially because I think they're going Joe Alt at number 5 just to show their commitment to the run. I think he's a nice day 2 pick for them.
I think in your scenario here, Marshawn Lloyd goes to the Chargers. I'm really interested to see where he lands from like a dynasty draft perspective, because it just seems like such a good landing spot that, you know, I could see him jumping a couple of these other guys that maybe are higher in like pre-draft rankings, again, just because of that landing spot. He's not going to do that in my landing spot, but I actually think this is pretty decent. I sent him to the Panthers. Number 1, I like a big back with balance. Okay. I also think that Dave Canales and every coach from that staff, not to the degree that Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman have done, but they've continued to emphasize the value that they're going to place on the run game, right? Dave Canales at the Combine said, I'm going to show you how stubborn I can be with the ground game, which, you know, the analytics bros on Twitter absolutely loved. You got to have
#establish.
They're going to try to establish that thing there. And to me, like, they got acceptable play out of Chuba Hubbard last year after getting anything but from Miles Sanders.
I think that seems more of an indictment of Miles Sanders than anything.
Correct. Yeah, that's how I felt all of last year. That I think the answer in the Panthers' backfield was not necessarily Chuba Hubbard. It was just not Miles Sanders. Yeah, right. And then I do think you throw Marshawn Lloyd in here, you have real competition and a guy that could be that like feature back for you. So that was a spot I ended up sending him.
All right, I can get down with that. And I was really trying to find a landing spot for somebody for the Panthers, but I felt like Marshawn Lloyd to the Chargers worked so well.
Well, it's definitely better than, I mean, from a fantasy perspective, yeah, it's definitely way better.
It's definitely way better. I'll give you a couple more real quick.
Okay.
Isaac Guerrero is just interesting to me.
Okay.
I was gonna say the Cowboys. Like because here's One, it just seems to fit with the Cowboys being like, we're all in. And they're like, we drafted Isaac Guerrero. Like, what do you want, man?
all the mock drafts, all the Cowboys fans like, we're getting Jonathon Brooks, baby. 56 overall. Just write that in pen.
We got Isaac Guerrero. I mean, like, we can go Rico Dowdle, and then we'll bring in Isaac Guerrero to kind of be our little, like, bull and, like, kind of get her short yardage. So that was one. Audric Estime to the Titans. I know they got.
I was as if they don't have enough running
backs. But they have two of the same guy, man. Yeah. It's like they're Pokemon trying to catch them all. Estime is different than Spears and then Tony Pollard, right? He's not going to catch the football for you, but he's that guy who's sort of that hammer who, like, if you do have a lead, he's that guy that's just going to wear you down over and over and over. It may not be spectacular. It may be 4 yards at a time, but if you're trying to run a 4-minute offense, I think Estime can be your guy there in Tennessee. It's not sexy. It's not going to be sexy for anybody, but it's going to be effective.
Well, if you already didn't want to make excuses for his 40 time and all that, I'm not going to make him a Kyron Williams level outlier. You can go ahead and forget about it in your rookie draft if he goes to the Tennessee Titans. He'll be going on the fourth.
Oh, he's just not going to go at all.
I'll throw just one more out there. I sent Ray Davis to the Raiders because I think he is a little in terms of just big tempo back. He's a guy that could be kind of he's in an ideal scenario. I think the ideal scenario for Zamir White is a little samey. So 2 dogs, 1 bone, let somebody win this backfield, right? And Alexander Madison can have a good time hanging out.
Yeah, just enjoy Las Vegas, man.
Hey, Vegas is a fun town.
It's a fun town, man.
Probably don't want to be there for too long. But all right, let's talk pass catchers. Give me your Marvin Harrison Jr. landing spot.
I mean, it's got to be the Cardinals. I know it's boring. We've talked about this for months on end, but why not? There's a reason for it, right? They've lost DeAndre Hopkins a couple years ago. They've lost Hollywood Brown. Kyler Murray showed us last year he still has a lot left to offer, which I thought was funny because I feel like this time last year there's a lot of are the Cardinals tanking for Caleb? Are we going to see Kyler Murray? And then Kyler came back and we're like, oh yeah, man, this dude's still good. But you got to give him something to work with. And why not give him, I know that these top 3 guys, at some point it's all about personal preference, but Harrison's the guy that we have been hearing about for 2 years as a complete prospect. Why not give your franchise quarterback that guy and see what you can do with him?
Marcus, I'm super upset with you.
Why is that?
Because this is a fantasy wish casting, mock draft. And you're not going to send Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Chargers? I mean, we both in our heart of hearts know that it's not going to happen. Right? We both know that Jim Harbaugh probably is going offensive tackle or trading down or trade down that facilitates an offensive tackle.
Right.
Our mutual friend and former colleagues, Matt Money Smith and Chris Hayrie over at the Chargers in-house podcast had to bring me on to do a receiver episode because the fans are so pissed about the idea that they're going to go tackle. The fans hate it. Everybody hates it. It just is what it is. So how can we not send Marvin Harrison to the Chargers? Because this is a fake world. This is not real. We're not trying to get things right. Come on. Justin Herbert has shown you that he can work with a vertical downfield tight coverage merchant, which is what Mike Williams is. Marvin Harrison can do that. He's also shown you that he can win with a precise I run every route technician in Keenan Allen. Marvin Harrison is also that. He's basically the 2 receivers that they lost combined into one. If we are wish casting Marcus Grant, this has to be the answer.
I mean, but doesn't that apply to Kyler Murray and what they've lost in Arizona over the last few years?
So don't worry, I got something coming. I'm not leaving Kyler out to dry. I got something coming for Kyler, but I'm just trying to. Maybe I'm just a Herbert guy, but
I like Herbert too, and I do have a guy mocked to the Chargers. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay, well, fine. Then give me. Who do you have going to the Chargers?
Oh, I was going to say Brian Thomas.
Oh, okay, well, that's not as exciting. I mean, it's good, but it's not as exciting.
I know, but look, just letting Herbo stand back there and throw deep shots to Brian Thomas, that seems exciting. Plus, it feels like this is their chance to sort of get a redo on Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, well, okay, that actually is true because I've been saying all throughout the draft that Brian Thomas is the actualized version of what people wanted Quentin Johnson and Christian Watson to be. In terms of you just mentioned Pokemon, he is the Charizard of that family there.
Right.
I mean, shoot, is Quentin Johnson even Charmander?
Is he Charmander?
Charmander at that little light goes out on his tail. I don't know, but I think that look, you're running the ball a lot. You're trying to bring a safety down in the box, and we're ripping on go routes here to Brian Thomas. I think that does make sense. So my Cardinals match was Roma Dunze.
Okay.
So I got something pretty good here for Kyler Murray too.
All right.
I do think that, I'm not a DeAndre Hopkins, Roma Dunze comp guy. I've given him the Devontae Adams and Allen Robinson on the low end sort of comp.
Mm-hmm.
But again, these are all like X receivers, guys you can put on the backside, and we've seen that Kyler Murray, when that guy's available, can have some success.
All right. Well, so I sent Roma Dunze to the Cowboys.
That's real wish casting, and I love it.
I mean, just pair him up with CeeDee Lamb. Look, I know Brandon Cooks is still there, but we have definitely seen the best of Brandon Cooks, right? That part's in the rearview mirror now. Like, why not have a CeeDee Lamb, Roma Dunze pairing for however long it's going to last, considering Jerry doesn't seem all that interested in paying CeeDee Lamb? That's insane. That's another conversation.
Yeah.
But, why not have those two guys, especially because, I don't know what they're doing with their backfield. It looks like they want to throw the ball a ton right now. So why not give them this sort of big body technician guy to go along with your slot lined up wide receiver, Maven. Yes, it is super wish casting, but it seems like it'd be a lot. I don't even like the Cowboys. That seems like it'd be a lot of fun.
It would be awesome. And I do think they need a receiver.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that is, we talk about offensive line, of course, that's a huge deal. We talk about running back. All those are positions of need. But that receiver room is not very good beyond CeeDee Lamb. Like, unless Jalen Tolbert takes a huge step forward, they really need like an X receiver to replace Michael Gallup. Roma Dunze is a fantastic prospect at X receiver, so I like that. So, okay, we talked about the other two big three. The final guy, Malik Neighbors, where'd you send him?
Oh, this is super wish casting, and it's never going to happen in a gazillion years. But let's send him to Baltimore, man.
Okay.
Let's put him with Zay Flowers, because it just seems like the Ravens they really are trying to get wide receivers there for Lamar Jackson. And it has Zay Flowers looks like he's going to be something. Rashad Bateman.
Injuries. Yeah.
Odell Beckham. That was a failed experiment. Malik Neighbors is that guy that can sort of work the deep middle of the field. Lamar's not afraid to put the ball there.
Yeah.
I think that could be a fun thing. Again, in a million years, this is never, ever, ever going to happen. But man, the idea of Malik Neighbors staying in purple, going to Baltimore, I'm sure the Ravens flock would love to see that.
Yeah, a lot of yak potential in that offense there, which they haven't really had yak guys there with Lamar Jackson until they draft Zay Flowers. I almost don't even want to say my Malik Neighbors one, because it's just like, I think if someone's going to have to go to the Giants, I think Malik Neighbors is uniquely skilled to survive that landing spot. I don't even want to say this. You're putting this on me here that you just send him
putting it on you.
Yeah, you just sent him to the damn Ravens. Like, that's not going to happen. So I got to send somebody.
I admitted it wasn't going to happen. I admitted mine was far-fetched.
And mine really might happen. So you know what?
So bring us back down to reality.
Yeah, here's the deal. You bring the camera over. This is what's going to happen here. Malik Neighbors is going to go to the Giants. You guys are going to have to deal with it. So let's start preparing to deal with it, because
when you say you guys, you mean fantasy folks or LSU fans? Like, what are we doing?
Maybe I'm talking to just Malik Neighbors himself. Here's the deal. You guys are going to have to deal with this. And the reason I think Malik Neighbors is uniquely skill set wise, suited to survive, like I said, not thrive, survive. Okay. Somebody's going to have to survive this landing spot. I do think they can scheme up ways to get him the ball in space. And Daniel Jones, for all of his flaws, can point and shoot. Okay. He is a point and shoot quarterback. You're just saying, hey, get it to this guy. If he's running crossing routes, okay, let's go. Let's just grip it and rip it back there. And I then let Malik Neighbors do the rest of the work.
I can't believe you just compared Daniel Jones to a Polaroid camera. This is just point and shoot.
Yeah. Talk about a slow developing picture.
I was like, are you even old enough to know what a Polaroid camera is?
Yeah, I know what a Polaroid
All right, cool.
We had a bunch of Polaroid cameras at my wedding.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't actually developed them yet, because maybe the 3rd year anniversary.
How long has it been?
All right, so those are the big three receivers. You mentioned you had Brian Thomas going to the Chargers.
Yep.
I have Brian Thomas going to the Colts. Another landing spot I feel like I've talked about on the show a lot, but he just basically, you take Alec Pierce, say thank you for your service, appreciate your time. We're just going to throw this guy into your role, and he's going to be better at it. So I think that makes sense. Get a lid lifter, X receiver there to go along with Josh Downs, nice slot receiver I really like, and Michael Pittman.
Side note, I sort of let Roto Pat Doherty kind of talked me into taking Alec Pierce late in drafts, because he had this galaxy brain idea that maybe, just maybe, they'd hit a bunch of chunk plays with Alec Pierce. And that didn't. But it was also under the premise that,
Yeah,
that Anthony Richardson was going to be there.
I was going to say, I mean, I remember people like halfway through the 2018 season giving me a bunch of crap about like, or was it 2019 maybe, like, bro, you told me Curtis Samuel was breaking out this year. Well, I was also under the impression Kyle Allen would not be the quarterback. And like Gardner Minshew way better than Kyle Allen, but stylistically very different from Anthony Richardson. So sometimes, yeah, what you say, what happens in preseason, but yeah, I kind of fell into the Alec Pierce stuff a little bit, but just hasn't really happened. Yeah. Okay. Talk to me about Ladd McConkey. Where'd you send him? I
actually sent him to the Jetropolitans.
Okay.
I think he's sort of that third option, that sort of nice technician who gives you, look, you've got the incredible athleticism and just all around playmaking of Garrett Wilson. You've got the downfield, jump ball threat of Mike Williams. And so Ladd McConkey kind of gives you that route running technician, that guy who can get open. Again, this is all sort of assuming that one, Aaron Rodgers is healthy, and two, not on some sort of psychedelic retreat this season.
A lot of assumptions.
A lot of assumptions here, I admit. But I think he's sort of that nice third option for you there. I really thought, the 49ers are a landing spot for him originally. Then they went out and signed Trent Taylor. I know they're sort of different players, but it also just seems like it filled a need, so they're not going to necessarily make that move. So I sent him to the Jets for that reason.
I love that Jets landing spot. I hadn't considered it, but like, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Just number one, I think you need another separator in there, regardless of Mike Williams' status. I just think they need that next piece too. And he can be a guy that alternates. Like Garrett Wilson has told me before, he loves to run routes from the slot. Like he actually wants more slot work to do that, like the big post routes and big over routes and stuff like that, and get those more yak opportunities. I think he and Ladd can kind of alternate between flanker slot there while you have Mike Williams at X. So I like that landing spot a lot. I sent him to the Falcons, sort of doing a less exciting version of what I just said, but with Darnell Mooney, where the two guys that I think can alternate between flanker, slot, and like I think the Falcons, look, I know that we're really focused on, we got to get Drake London the ball, we got to get Kyle Pitts the ball, we know all the guys that we've been dissatisfied with in fantasy the last few years, but at the same time they do need another receiver. Like Darnell Mooney, nice player, but I think he's a 3. Rondale Moore's a fake receiver. That's not a wide receiver. Okay, that's a gadget player. So like one more receiver here, I think could help take this offense to the next level. And I think, again, a guy that not going to have to play X there for the Falcons, so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, I think that works too. We're all super excited about the Falcons, right? There's no way this can come back to bite us.
Never has before. Okay, AD Mitchell, where'd you send him?
I sent him to Houston. I sent him to the
what?
Texans. Yes.
Why?
Listen. So this is why. One,
no, this is terrible.
Well, first off, I haven't seen a more polarizing wide receiver prospect in a while than AD Mitchell, because it's like all the film guys are like, yeah, man, this is the dude. And all the analytics guys are like,
nope. Yeah.
So, but the one thing is the low yards per route run. So I wanted to put him with an air yards king like CJ Stroud. Also putting him in a situation where there isn't that pressure on him to be the guy, because you got Nico Collins, you got Tank Dell. He's your third option in the Houston offense. I see you're
He's
already,
like fourth because they have Stephon Diggs now. I mean,
I forgot they have Stephon Diggs.
Jeez, yeah. Okay, well that was awful. I was gonna say, did you not see like the tension headache I'm developing from splitting these targets
again?
Up?
Though, here's the thing. Like, I don't see. AD Mitchell's gonna be so volatile.
Yeah,
right. He's just so volatile wherever you go. It just, I don't know. Where do you have him going?
I have him going to Kansas City, like the complete opposite end of the spectrum there, of like he's probably moonwalking into like 100+ targets in my scenario. But I guess it comes down to where you view AD Mitchell, because there's one side of the camp that would definitely view him like needing to be a slow developing picture there, right? And I think that would be the case, obviously, definitely in Houston, but any spot like that, right? So I do think though he has. See, I'd be surprised to find this. I've come down on kind of like a centrist vibe with the AD Mitchell stuff. I'm not really in one camp or the other, because I do think he shows the tangible skills to be an outlier, right? Like everything in his statistical profile says like that is an outlier. Okay. If he's going to be good, he's going to be an outlier. I think if he is going to develop in that way, he's got the man coverage and press coverage skills to do it, but he's not a great route runner against like zone coverage. And obviously NFL is a very zone heavy league, but if you're going to play X and you're going to play outside, it's more important. I mean, all my charting data would show you it's more important to be better against press and man coverage, but that can still lead him to be sort of like a volatile George Pickens type. So I think it can't
a volatile George Pickens type like that.
I'm grouping that is implied. I could have said a George Pickens type, but there are people out there that think George Pickens is like a sneaky elite receiver, and you're just too stupid to know it. Not you, Marcus Grant, but everybody is too stupid to know it. So AD Mitchell, though, in Kansas City, I think he just they need an X receiver. They need a guy that's going to be that pure outside perimeter player. I think it just makes sense there.
Yeah, look. If there's one, it's weird. People like the Chiefs need a wide receiver. They need a wide. They're back-to-back Super Bowl champions.
Yeah, they don't need it, but it'd be nice
because we look at Patrick Mahomes like we want a guy that we can just attach to this offense.
Yeah, and also like I sent AD Mitchell there because like. Okay, grow up. Enough of the like little gadgety, tiny like speed players that like probably need to run routes from the slot. Yeah, I know it. I know what you're gonna do.
So then I shouldn't have sent Xavier Worthy.
No, like enough already with the tiny receivers, the speed guys. Like, yeah, I can't wait to see how creatively they can deploy Kadarius Toney. I can't wait to see how Sky Moore. He is a gadgety guy.
So here's the thing. My logic was sort of like that, but kind of the reverse side of that coin. It wasn't like I can't wait to see. It's more like, hey man, this dude is a small, fast guy. Who can put him in that situation? It's Andy Reid. It wasn't like, yeah, man, this is gonna be really fun. This is like, I feel like this is the guy who can best set him up for success.
Yeah, get hyped for the like 4th and 1 critical situation like end around to Xavier Worthy that Matt Nagy's going to call up.
I mean, look, I got to send him to Pittsburgh and have Arthur Smith drawing up plays for him.
I do have one guy going to Pittsburgh. We'll get to that in a little bit, but yeah, no, look, I get it, Xavier Worthy, fine, but I just like get a real receiver on the outside, like get an X, like a jump. Like Patrick Mahomes has never had like a true boundary threat. I mean, Tyreek Hill, obviously great player, but he's like a movable chess piece as well. So like just a real X receiver on the backside.
That's why it would have been great if they would have somehow been able to snag Mike Evans. That would have been amazing.
Yeah, it would have been great, but we don't live in that much of a fantasy world. But let's stay in our fantasy world here. I'll just give you my Rams one, and I won't go long in this because I stole it from Jordan Vanek on the pod when he said the Rams. I think that makes so much sense for Xavier Worthy. Pre-snap motion. He will maybe not get a bunch of targets there, but he's going to open up so much space for Cooper Kupp, for Puka Nacua. And obviously, from a speed perspective, Matthew Stafford's got the whip. He's got the right arm to get that thing down the field.
So he's 2-2 2.0.
Exactly, literally, yeah. He's 2-2 2.0.
2-2 2.0.
I actually kind of hope that doesn't happen now because that's going to be tough for me to say. And now that you just put it in my brain, I'm going to have to say it every single time. I hope it doesn't get
Bree, I'm sorry when your husband's saying 2-2 2.0 like all night long. I'm sorry.
Yeah, she needs a lot of apologies. So that's a good one that you had there. Okay, let's do Ricky Pearsall.
Ricky Pearsall I sent to the Commanders as a third option there to go along with McLaurin and Dotson. Another guy who is sort of great with contest. See, like, so this is my logic, right? Because I sent Michael Penix to the Commanders as a guy who needs guys who can kind of sort of make contested catches, can make those difficult catches for him. And so Pearsall's sort of that guy.
And 3 separators too between Pearsall, Dotson, and McLaurin.
Right.
Too.
So like that was my whole logic. I'm like, if we're building this whole fantasy world and putting this team together, Wishcasting, I'm gonna have Penix as my quarterback. I'm gonna have McLaurin, Dotson, and Pearsall as my wide receivers there.
All right, I like that a lot. I sent him to the Panthers, sort of in a similar vibe of all right, we've got Deontay Johnson. He's a separator. We've got Adam Thielen, who mans the big slot receiver position well at this point in his career.
Right.
Not doing a ton down the field, but he can do those little option routes pretty well. Pearsall, I think, mixes in there and gives Bryce Young another option. I actually think that'd be a really nice landing spot for him. Just a guy that can play, I think, inside and out, so he can move around the formation a little bit here, and that allows Deontay to strictly focus kind of on the outside duties and alternate a little bit with Thielen there. Not the sexiest fantasy landing spot, but I do think it makes sense.
It is what it is.
All right, Keon Coleman. I'm super interested where you sent him. I'll give mine first, though. Okay. I sent him to the Bengals. Another one that I've been talking about a lot. They lose Tyler Boyd in free agency. I mean, they lose. They just haven't signed him back.
They haven't just done anything. Right?
Yeah, he's actually still out there and not on the team, but Tyler Boyd's not on the roster. That's a more professional way of saying it. Tyler Boyd is not on the roster. They have long-term questions about T. Higgins, but I think Keon Coleman is a guy that you need to move into the slot, right? I've talked about this a lot, with the reception perception data and guys that are at his ranking in terms of press and man coverage success rate. All the guys that have hit have been guys that have moved into the slot. So I think he can move in right away and take over Tyler Boyd's position and can eventually become the guy that you throw the ball to the second most on the team behind Jamar Chase. And I also think like he needs a quarterback that's going to be comfortable throwing into tight windows, and Joe Burrow is that guy.
Okay, so mine's not exciting at all, but it's the Saints. Just because
that actually is pretty good though. I like this.
Because like I think one, I would put him in the slot too, and it frees you up to move Rashid Shaheed maybe to the outside. Let him use his speed and see if he can get downfield for you. I mean, look, I know that they were ready to, drop Derek Carr in the Mississippi River before the season was over this past year, but
I think they're still there, man. I don't know if that's. I don't think
it's changed. No, you're right. Like, look, I wanted Jameis Winston to be the starter just because I think it's going to be fun. I thought it was going to be fun potentially. The Saints fans wanted him to be a starter because they were just sick of seeing Derek Carr out there.
Dude, I think they were ready for you to be the starter. Okay?
Literally anybody. But I think Keon Coleman, he's got these same, I don't want to call him Michael Thomas, but he has the same body type as Michael Thomas. And he's a big guy. And as you mentioned, can work out of the slot. So if they decide that is a role they are looking to regenerate, I think Keon Coleman can be their guy.
Yeah, Daniel Jeremiah compared to Marcus Colston. Obviously, like that coaching staff is not there anymore. They finally moved on from Pete Carmichael. It's Clint Kubiak there. So still, but maybe there's some like, hey, maybe Dennis Allen can get on the blower with Sean Payton and just be like, is that playbook still one of the closets like here that I can look up and then maybe you can share some ideas with me?
Can you give me access to the Google Doc, something, please?
Yeah, I kind of like that one. All right, where'd you send Xavier Legette?
All right, so you talk about sacrificing people to the Patriots. I sacrificed him to the Patriots. Just look, I read reception perception too. As a guy that needs to work in space, they have a quarterback, at least right now. As of this moment, as we record this, Jacoby Brissett is the starting quarterback there in New England. He's a guy who's going to get you the ball in space. He's not going to push it down the field. That's just not a thing that Legette did a lot of in college. Doesn't mean he can't do it. It just means he wasn't asked to do it necessarily at South Carolina. But, with the quarterback situation being what it is, just a guy that as long as there's somebody who can get him the football and let him work, I think that's a place to go. And Lord knows they need wide receivers in New England right now.
They definitely do. I did think about that, and this is a pairing that's been, made quite a bit. But people think that, like, all right, we need an X receiver, so we need Xavier Legette. I'm with you. Obviously, you cited my website, so I'm with you. I'm with you that he's a guy that, if you're going to have him out as your X, he's going to be very Alshon Jeffrey-ish, is sort of the comp. But he's not Deebo Samuel. There is no Deebo Samuel. But, like, if you're going to use him, I think best, you're going to do the non-gimmicky running backy Deebo Samuel things where you're getting him behind the line of scrimmage, off the line, moving him pre-snap and crossing routes. Maybe New England can execute that. Maybe Arthur Smith in Pittsburgh could execute that. I know that, Arthur Smith, he's
not a fantasy favorite.
Not the favorite of most folks in the community. Favorite. But think about maybe I just need to get this out of my head with Arthur Smith so I can stop talking like a jackass. But think about all those like crossing routes in the Tennessee Titans offense. Like those are the routes I want to see Xavier Legette running. Like he's built like AJ Brown, doesn't play like AJ Brown, but just strictly that part of the AJ Brown playbook early on with the Titans and Arthur Smith, I think Legette can, file in there. And look, this is going to be a low volume passing offense anyways. We're trying to just hit a couple of extra big plays. We're trying to incentivize Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, two guys that don't throw over the middle of the field. We're trying to incentivize them to throw over the middle of the field. If you can just show them the film of, we're going to get this big guy, Xavier Legette, rumbling over the middle, crossing routes against zone coverage, rip that thing in there, maybe they finally do it.
That's really cute. Maybe Justin Fields you can convince to start doing that. Yeah. At this point, like getting Russell Wilson to do that, it's like, like asking my dad how to download a podcast. Like I love him. It's just not a strong suit of his. Like he's just not gonna, it's gonna take some work.
It's trying to get my mother to use pronunciation in text messaging.
Yeah.
I mean, like I had this conversation with my mom. Like, Mom, if you're gonna engage with the technology, you need to use it correctly.
Right.
Okay. We're the old men now, Marcus. Especially you, not me. Actually, I'm still in my prime. Okay. Speaking of in my prime, this podcast is running a little bit long, as is Matt Harmon podcasts want to do. So let's rapid fire these last 3 pass catchers and any extras that you want to get out here. So Troy Franklin, where's your landing spot?
Chicago Bears. He's that deep threat, that speed guy to go along with. DJ Moore can do a lot of things. Keenan Allen, we know who he is. Troy Franklin's going to be that field stretcher so that when Caleb Williams gets out of structure and everything starts to break down, he can hit that 40-yard shot down the field to Troy Franklin.
And then Troy Franklin won't catch it.
Look, that's a different conversation, right? But at least it was there for him.
At least it was there for him. I sent him to the Jaguars because I think
they need more receivers.
Yeah, they keep spending money, and you know what? They keep needing receivers. So you can maybe ask some questions about Trent Baalke's team building and his press conference farting. Did you see that clip, by the way?
Yeah, I didn't see that.
I mean, that was.
He at least said excuse me, so give him that.
I just wouldn't even at that point. Who cares? Just like let it rip. Literally.
I mean, you made the sound. Everybody heard it. You got to at least acknowledge it.
Nah, I would not have acknowledged it. I may have farted on this podcast. Nobody would. There would be no way of knowing. Actually, you would know. I take that back. So Troy Franklin to the Jaguars. I think optimal usage for him is basically what they wanted to do with Calvin Ridley had they brought him back. Where I think he is the guy that you have Gabe Davis, you kind of sacrifice him to the X receiver role, let him run vertical routes from there. And then I think Troy Franklin, who played as a vertical X in college, he can't do that in the pros. I think too skinny, doesn't like play through contact well. So let's get him off the ball and kind of run these like crossing routes and stuff like that. It makes sense to me.
All
right. Jermaine Burton.
I mean, obviously, when you talk Jermaine Burton, the off-field stuff is like the big asterisk next to him. But barring that, I sent him to the Bills.
Man, that's spicy.
I sent him to the Bills, right? I mean, they've moved on from Stephon Diggs. It wasn't a question of Diggs' talent. It was more that like what he brought in the locker room was not worth putting up with what he was giving you on the field.
So let's get Jermaine Burton.
Let's put Jermaine Burton in there. It's going to be great. No, but I just think in terms of like what he can do, like there's no argument about what he can do on the field and his ability. And he can give you sort of all those things because, look, I know the Bills front office can sit up there and say, we don't really need a number one wide receiver. And it's like, yeah, man, like I don't need shoes to run a marathon, but it helps, so why not give your guy the potential for a number one receiver? And maybe just being in the, out there in Western New York where there's not a whole lot to do, maybe keeps him out of trouble.
Marcus, we're friends, right?
I mean, it sort of worked with Look, early Marshawn Lynch was sort of a knucklehead. He went to Buffalo, he kind of got himself straight, and then the rest of his career took off from there.
So we're friends, right?
I'd like to believe so.
Yeah, I'd like to think so as well.
Yes.
Friends need to help certain friends, not like overdraft the out of Jermaine Burton if he ends up with the Buffalo Bills. I mean, because that guy is, all the character stuff aside, we just, it's a huge asterisk, right? I mean, he could end up going on friggin' day 3. But if he ended up with the Bills, that is like a perfect fit. I actually think Steph Diggs is a pretty good comp. I sort of said he's like angry, plays angry, aggressive, Chris Olave, right? Okay. Which I think those are all in the same buckets and archetypes of receivers there. So yeah, you as my friend would have to really contain me from my Jermaine Burton enthusiasm because like he could be out of the damn league in 3 years. So I sent Javon Baker to the Bills, by the way. I didn't have him on my list, but in the article version for the site, I ended up making him my Bills draft pick there because I do think if they don't miss out on one of the early receivers, he's like the next best X receiver after the top guy. So I sent Jermaine Burton, though, to the Cowboys. Okay. Similar analysis what you had earlier where they need another receiver. Let's get this guy in the mix and see what happens from a vertical perspective. All right, final one. We're talking here. Brock Bowers. This is a heavy judgment on you for where you send Brock Bowers. So I'm gonna go first because I'm heavily judging you. Okay. I send him to the Broncos. Which we've talked about on the show. Super boring. Producer Brett here over there is already rolling his eyes. He hates the fact that his team's going to draft a good player. Just that's disgusting to him. Sean Payton's going to know what to do with Brock Bowers. Okay, he's going to know what to do with Brock Bowers. And I also had Bo Nix going there. So in my little dream scenario, the Broncos have taken Brock Bowers at 12. And then they were not able to physically restrain Sean Payton from trading back into the late first round, though. It's a little more responsible, late first round to get Bo Nix. And I think like Brock Bowers could catch damn near 85 balls in that role. So
I don't hate it because I wanted Greg Dulcich to be a thing in Denver too.
Yeah, he's basically what Greg Dulcich. Yeah, maybe that's why Brett doesn't. Yeah, Brett doesn't. Brett still is holding on to his short shorts and facial hair stonk and the hair. And all that stuff.
I wanted Greg Dulcich to be a thing, so I don't hate that. I sent Brock Bowers to Carolina.
Okay.
I sent him to the Panthers because to me it sort of shades of Sam Laporta in the sense that why we love Laporta is because he walked into a ready-made situation where he was going to walk in, be the tight end one, get a ton of targets, right? I'm not worried about Brock Bowers competing with Tommy Trimble or whoever else is there in Carolina. There are targets to be. Yes, Deontay Johnson is there. Sure, Adam Thielen did some nice things there, but there's a real opportunity for Brock Bowers to go to Carolina and be a target magnet there. And look, I know the whole trope about young quarterbacks and tight ends has been proven to be generally false, but when you have a tight end like Brock Bowers, when you have a tight end like Brock Bowers, that's going to help out your young quarterback a ton.
I actually think there's been some buzz, at least, that like they would maybe trade back into the first round if he fell to a certain range, did Brock Bowers. I think this one probably not going to happen, but could happen. And it's a pretty good landing spot. I don't know about you, but I actually kind of trust and like Dave Canales as an offensive coordinator. So I think he could get this done. But that would be very interesting. Like, where would Brock Bowers go in fantasy? And like, he could end up being a Laporta type where, rookie tight ends, what is the offensive situation, all that stuff. I mean, I think that's actually, I'm not judging you. That's a pretty good one.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. At least I get out of here with, one less moment of judgment. I'm sure you've judged me for plenty of other things today.
Oh, absolutely. Whether I said it or not.
I'd expect nothing less.
Yeah.
Honestly. We've known each other long enough.
At this point, yeah, we absolutely have. All right, buddy. That was electric. I appreciate you joining us for this. Tell the people what you've got coming up, from a draft coverage perspective, what they can subscribe to and how they can support your work at that little mom and pop shop that you're working at.
This little startup I work at called the National Football League. Yeah. We are actually going to be doing our own post-first round live stream. You can find that on YouTube. It'll be myself, Michael F. Florio. You have to make sure you have the Michael F. Florio to be separated from the other guy. And Laquan Jones will be with us for that one as well. Yeah. So we will kind of go through all the fantasy relevant picks, at least in the first rounds. You can see that on Thursday night, I guess Friday morning, depending on where you live in this great country of ours. Other than that, the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast, you can find that once a week wherever you find podcasts, or where you find terrible podcasts too. They're probably all in the same place. And then I actually have the pleasure of doing some stuff over at Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life with a very smart man named Dwayne McFarland, who makes me better at this job every time I talk to him. So you can also find that on YouTube and wherever you find podcasts.
Marcas Grant, busy man, nice enough to take a little over an hour of your time out for this. Appreciate you, buddy. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, once you turn off the Yahoo YouTube stream, once that's over, you just go right over to that YouTube stream, because it's draft week, baby. You are mainlining content as you should. All right, that's going to do it for this show. Be sure to tune in to the Yahoo live draft stream. Seriously, please do. Watch it. Please watch it. Yeah, I really need you to watch it. In the meantime, that's going to do it for this show. We will be back, as mentioned, with Charles McDonald for our round 1 recap. Look for that in your feeds Friday morning. Until then, we're out.